Hi folks, how's it going? By the end of this training, I want you to be able to know how to cook, basically, from start to finish. So my name is David Santander. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, but also before I did that, I was a cook in a restaurant. So we had to cook a lot of stuff. We had to make it really, really tasty, obviously, but some of the people that I worked with were pretty high level chefs. They were clean and tidy and very diligent about what they did and how they did it. So I want to impart what I learned in those high level kitchens, high level, medium, upper medium level kitchens, but who are fine dining trained. I want to impart some of those skills to you so that by the end of this, I'll keep it as short and quick as I possibly can, as lean as I can, so that you will know by the end of this how to cook. So I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to start looking stuff up and we're just going to build this thing together as we go. So if you're not watching this, that's fine. Just listen along. I'm going to try and make sure that there's some information um, tagged to the audio of this. And if not, then hopefully it'll go into your brain and you remember it. And if you are watching, then don't worry about seeing my little face up in the corner. I'm going to be looking stuff up and we're going to build a document that says how to cook. So first we need to have vision. Vision. What do you want to make? What do you want to make and why? Okay. Do you want to make meals for dinner for your family? Do you want to make yourself lunch? Do you want to just get better at cooking more quickly so that it's not such a terrible process of preparing food for yourself, preparing food for your loved ones? Maybe you could make one lunch for the week and just cut it into 5 pieces, right? Maybe it would be like a frittata or a casserole or something like that that you can just take, grab and go. All right, that's really useful. So we're going to say, first thing I want you to determine is what do you want to make and why. What dish do you want to make? Do you want to make a cake? Do you want to make frittata? Do you want to make pasta, lasagna, whatever it is? Determine what you want to do because each of those are going to have a different process. So baking is very like recipe driven, very, very precise. You got to be very precise with the chemistry of it. And then you can start to get a little bit more obscure and avant-garde. And with cooking, you can get more avant-garde more early, but you got to be careful because if you're not following recipes, you're going to spend a lot of weeks and months eating garbage, eating things that you don't that you feel guilty throwing in the garbage because it came out crappy or not tasty. Trust me, speaking from experience, when I started learning how to cook, I didn't follow any recipes. We were just winging it and things turned out pretty awful. So the next thing you want to do is find a recipe. Find a recipe. If you're listening, okay, so if you're learning how to cook for the first time, that's great. If you already know how to cook and you're looking at this to kind of see how I go about the process, that's great too. If you're, Gordon Ramsay and you're watching this, then feel free to curse me out. Or, any hopefully I want this to be nourishing for anybody, right? Any level of the process. Hopefully you can take something with you. So how to cook, right? Zero to meal. So you got your vision first. What are you doing and why? What are you doing and why? And then your recipe. Pull it out. Pull that recipe out. See what you're cooking. Then mise en place. Okay? If you have your recipe, that's the thing that's going to guide you and give you the highest likelihood of success, obviously with also the skills that you need to know for how to cook. But the next step here is mise en place, which means everything in its place. Everything in its place. I had this teacher, he came up to me one day and he said, my station in the restaurant was a mess. So in the restaurant you have various different stations. There's a grill station, there's a saute on the stovetop station, there's a French fry station, there's a salad station. I was at the salad station. I was cooking and prepping, and it's kind of like one step above dishwasher or prep cook is the salad station. They work your way up through there. Well, that's how some people look at it. Not everybody looks at it that way, but anyway. And he comes over to me and he's like, the sloppiness, in so many words, he said, basically the sloppiness of your station is what the inside of your head looks like. If you can get your station, where you are in the kitchen, cleaned off. Don't start on a dirty countertop. Don't start cooking on a dirty countertop. You got to start clean. Clean off the countertop. All the distractions, cell phone, books, all kinds of other things, right? If you're using your cell phone for recipes, like that's fine. If you're listening to music while you cook, that's fine. I love to do that too. But make sure you have space to work, as much space as you can. I know kitchens are limited and whatever. So we want to make sure that we have enough clean space to work, clean field. Then you have mise en place, right? So you go into a recipe. I'm just going to pull up a random recipe. Recipe for, let's just say random recipe. I don't know what else to cook. I don't know what to cook today. I have no idea. Random recipe. Okay. There's random recipe generators, right? Okay. So online, chicken and turkey recipes, black-eyed peas, black beans, and chicken stew. Sounds great. And if you're vegan, sub for vegan things. Substitute chicken for other stuff. Okay, so you look here. Here are the parts of a recipe. If you can't look, listen. Here are the parts of a recipe. So you can have the directions. They tell you what to do. You're going to have the list. You can have the list of what's in it. Okay? Now, if you want to go backwards, if you say, I have tofu, carrots, broccoli, and tuna fish. You just type those things in. Broccoli tuna salad comes up, right? All different kinds. Let's see, Thai tuna and broccoli salad, 10-minute broccoli tofu bowls. You can have all different kinds of ideas. If you just put in the ingredients that you have in Google, all different kinds of recipes are going to start to come up, right? And there's this little feature where it'll say missing and must include. So if we do must include tofu and broccoli, I don't know how many tofu tuna casserole things we're going to find up. But anyway, if you wanted to find a recipe backwards, that's how you do it. You say, I have these 5 ingredients. You go in Google, you ask Google to generate a recipe, and it'll come up. It's not really going to generate the recipe, but it'll sift recipes up to the top for you to find. So, okay. What you do is you go through each of the things on the list. Now, this is a long list. Don't worry about it. But, 2 ounces of onion, 2 ounces zucchini, 2 ounces green bell pepper. Okay. Ounces. If you don't have a kitchen scale, a cooking scale, kitchen scale, it's not a bad idea to get one. They're a couple bucks. You can get one for under 20 bucks on Amazon. Most recipes aren't going to have things in ounces. I don't know why this one does. Usually you get like cup, half a cup, quarter cup. Let's see, that recipe generator, that recipe was for whatever reason that was in grams and ounces or weight units. So let's try this chili mac and cheese recipe. See what it says. No. Okay, let's see. No, it's making me sign up for a thing. Chili mac and cheese. Okay. Don't get hung up on what it is that we're talking right now. If you don't want to learn how to cook chili mac and cheese, that's fine. This is actually a great picture of what mise en place looks like. And if you can't see because you're just listening to this as you're going along, what it is basically a bunch of individual dishes, cans, and bowls that have each of the ingredients sorted out for you, ready to go. So you see your beef is in a bowl, your peppers are chopped up and ready to go in a bowl, cheese shredded and ready to go in a bowl, bone broth stock measured out, ready to go, etc., etc., etc. You want everything measured out and ready to go so that when it comes time to cook and assemble the meal, you're not scrambling around and looking for things after you need them. Timing can be very important in cooking. So if you're trying to throw stuff together on the fly, if it's your first time cooking, I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. Okay, you can get really good and you can get really skilled at improv and jazz on the fly, but you got to learn your scales, you got to learn a couple songs, learn a couple tunes, and then you start to learn things that you can pick out, right? You're going to learn a couple dishes and you start to see how things are made. You're going to see that there's a lot of principles recapitulated over and over again. There's a lot of technique over and over again that you get familiar with. You'll start to learn the lingo, you'll start to learn the process. So pick a simple recipe, build it, and repeat, right? So start after this training, or you want to pause this training, whatever, pick a simple recipe. You want to jump into it and try it, go ahead. If you don't want, I would recommend maybe listening to this till the end, but pick a simple, start simple. Start simple. If you see a list is 25 things on the thing, and you're like, oh my God, there's too many things, I don't know what to do. Don't worry about it. Okay? Pick a simple recipe. Chili mac and cheese, right? So we've got tablespoon of olive oil. So go get your olive oil and a tablespoon measure and bring it out. Measure it out into a dish. If you don't want to measure it into a dish, then have the tablespoon measure next to the olive oil. Ready to go. 2 cloves of garlic. Okay, now here we go. Now here's the thing that I wanted to teach you guys also. Very important. See how it says next to garlic cloves? It says minced. Next to the onions, it says finely chopped. Next to the bell peppers, it says chopped. Okay? Next to the cilantro, it says finely chopped. What are the different sizes and shapes? You're going to see this over and over and over again. Okay? So, shape, what do you call it? Shapes. What would I look up? Cooking, cutting terms. Okay. This is so crucial. This is so crucial to cooking. You want to learn the size of all of the the words for cutting and like how you cut things up, they're indicative of size, they're indicative of how you build a dish. So you're going to want to learn the terms. So slice is like taking a thing and kind of slicing it. I hate to use the definition in the term, but if you're listening and you're not watching, kind of the best I got. So actually there's a more technical one here. Cutting kitchen. Let's see, what would I look up? Kitchen chopping terms? I don't know. Culinary terms, chop, mince, dice, sizes. Okay, so you'll see. Yeah, there's a Wikipedia one talking about sizes and shapes. There's strip cuts, there's cube cuts, there's other more esoteric cuts that are beyond just strip and cube. So there's thick cut, point new. I'm gonna butcher the French on this, so don't worry about it. Like steak French fries, right? Those are a third by. There's all these different measurements. You can look at them on your own time. But large dice is a large square, right? About 3/4 of an inch to an inch, right? Medium dice, about half an inch cubes. Small dice is about 1/4 inch cubes. And Brunoise, I think it's Brunoise, is 1/8 of an inch. Fine Brunoise is 1/16 of an inch, getting small, right? Then there's mince, which is very finely divided uniform pieces. Rough cut is chopped less randomly, resulting in a variety of sizes and shapes. Wedges. So again, if you forget what any of these means, what any of these definitions mean, go online and look them up. Okay, I'm just going to copy paste this right here and drop it into our how to cook. To our how to cook document. Cuts, right? How to cut. Okay. Now we'll jump to a minute we'll start talking about types of knives and pans and stuff. Okay, so we're prepping. We're still in the prepping phase. We have our recipe. We're prepping the sizes of things. We're prepping the what's actually going to be in the dish. We're getting everything out, right? One red bell pepper, chop it up. Okay, it does. What do they mean when they say chop it up? Okay, you can look at the picture in the recipe. You can kind of eyeball it. Like, okay, I know about how big a noodle is. I know about how big a piece of a bean is. So it's going to be about a little bit bigger than a bean, but kind of square. So you don't have to be perfect with this, so don't stress it, don't worry about it. And over time, you're going to learn the speeds at which things cook and how some things cook more quickly, some things cook more slowly, and you'll be able to judge the size of the things that you're going to use. Sometimes you want things to be chunky, sometimes you want it to be smooth, right? Depends on the dish, depends what you like, depends on the taste, and you'll be able to sort that out. I trust you, you're smart. So, okay, so then we're going to go into the spice cabinet. We're going to grab our spices: cayenne, 2 teaspoons of cayenne, 2 teaspoons of paprika, teaspoon, teaspoon, teaspoon. Teaspoons and tablespoons are very different. Don't confuse the two. If something asks you to put half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper and you put half a tablespoon of cayenne pepper, it will taste very different. It will probably be spicy, and if you're not expecting that, it might soil the dish for you. You'll be like, whoops. Or you might just have a very exciting few moments looking for water and milk. So we have everything in place. Let's just say we have everything in place, right? Back to our mise en place picture. Everything's in our nice bowls. It's set out in front of us. It's ready to go. We're ready to cook the meal. Okay, well, so now we go from our recipe, which is going to usually list the ingredients first and the instructions second. So do it in that order. Go in that order. Now, a lot of times you're going to look up recipes online, and it's going to be somebody's blog with a bunch of ads all over the place and an article telling about how much their kids love it when they make chili mac and cheese, and how much their dog loves to lick the bowl, and all that nonsense that we don't necessarily care about. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I tend to get frustrated and I just scroll down until I see the meat and potatoes here, the ingredients and the instructions. Okay. Read all the instructions before you start. Okay? Read the instructions before you start. Now, just taking this one dish as an example, I'm going to read through it. I'm not going to bore you with all of it, but we're just going to talk about the process. Heat oil in a large pot over high heat. Okay. Now we're like, what's a large pot? What's a large pot? Now, assuming you didn't necessarily chop. Okay, we're going to talk kitchen supplies now. We're going to talk kitchen supplies. If you don't have a kitchen, even if you have a kitchen, but you don't have any supplies in it, you've just been eating Chinese food for the last 10 years, and now you're going to go to the kitchen supply store, the restaurant supply store, and you want to buy some stuff. Okay. Now, that's always fun for me. And I would actually recommend trying to find your local restaurant supply store. Some of them are very, like industrial kitchen supply stores. Some of them are very friendly to people coming in and buying stuff, and they aren't necessarily too picky about whether or not you own a restaurant. Some of them are less friendly about that. So you'll have to kind of call, look around, maybe Google, like a lot of them will have like like a showroom. You can just walk in, you can pick stuff off the shelves, and you can bring it to the register and they'll purchase it for you. Places like Restaurant Depot, you might need to have like an EIN number or a tax number or business ID or something showing that you have a business. You've registered with Restaurant Depot or the company, and that you're going to you're buying in bulk for a reason. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about like a Winco store. I'm talking about like a restaurant supply store. And the reason I like these is, one, because you're not getting ripped off by buying a pan at Kohl's. And two, the quality of stuff that you're buying is usually better. It's usually higher quality. I've gotten some good stuff off of Amazon, right? You can find good stuff on Amazon too. So let's make a list here in our so we got our cuts. Let's do supplies. I think you need, let's see, cutting board, knives, pots, pans, towels. Okay, these are the basicest basics that I can think of. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So cutting board, plastic for meat, wood for veg. Okay? Wood is permeable, so it's more likely to store bacteria. That's why we don't recommend using plastic for meat. You can use veg for meat. No, sorry. You can use plastic for veg. You can use plastic for meat, but don't use wood for meat. Now I know butcher blocks are made of wood, but they're sealed with like a wax. They're sealed. It's sealed with some sort of veneer that's going to prevent stuff from seeping in. They're conditioned a certain way. So unless you have a cutting board that you plan on conditioning and rubbing oils into and taking care of, I would not recommend doing that. Okay, maybe you have like a fancy Koa cutting board or something, but maybe you want to get one that's not as decorative, more of a workhorse. Okay, so knives. I think you can do everything in the kitchen that you need to do with a 9-inch. Okay, so there's all different kinds of knives. Lots of different kinds of knives. Kinds of knives. Culinary. Okay. There are so many, but you only need a few. Okay, and don't look, if you got money and you want to spend lots of money on a cool knife set, good on you. I love a fun knife set. But there's only a few kinds that you need, okay? So here's a little infographic, and if you can't see because you're listening, don't worry about it. You got the bread knife. It's serrated. It's like a saw for your bread. You got the chef's knife, which is kind of curved on both sides. You got the cleaver, which is a great chopping, hacking knife. Sometimes you can do some sawing with it. The utility knife, which is a little bit more of a grab all, right? It does a bunch of different things. You have the paring knife, which are usually short and nimble, right? They can articulate really well around different curves of the animal or the fruit. If you need to get around, like core around the bottom of an apple and pull that bottom hole out, you can do it that way. There's a Santoku knife, which I think is just one of the many Japanese types of knives. I don't know why they're necessarily singling this one out in this, but it's got kind of a long, flat, a long curved cutting edge and a more pronounced curve on the top edge. Now, there's all kinds of different knife techniques that go along with each of these different knives. Each knife you use a different way. There's a boning knife that gets in and around the bones of the animal, through the ribs, right around. It helps. It's very articulate and very sharp, so it cuts flesh better than maybe a paring knife would. It's usually a little bit harder. Now, if you're going to be breaking down an animal and cutting around the joints and doing all kinds of things like that, the boning knife is going to be a little bit stronger. It's going to bend less. But that being said, if you're forcing it, chances are it's not the most efficient way to go about separating that part of the animal. Now, these aren't the only knives. There's also slicing knives for this fillet knife, right, which is long and thin for fish. Looks a little bit like a boning knife. Does a different thing. There's all different kinds of fancy Japanese knife. The steak knife is very serrated, right, for dining with. Paring knife, don't get hung up on them. You can get away with using a chef's knife, which they usually come in 6, 9, 12-inch, 10, maybe 10-inch increment, those different increments. I would say you can get away with a 9 to 12-inch, no problem. That is going to do most of the stuff that you want it to do. Then there's the utility knife or a paring knife, just kind of a short knife. I don't even think I have a boning knife, to be honest. I don't have a bread knife. I used to have a cleaver, but I broke it on a coconut. But that's not a bad one to have. But you can do most stuff with a paring knife and a chef knife. Okay, if you only have those two knives, I used to think you could do everything with a 9-inch or a 12-inch chef knife and a 9 or a 12-inch frying pan, and that's all you needed. And I do still believe that to a certain extent. But depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you may want specialty knives to do the job. Now, if you notice in this next picture, here's a more clear version of all the different knives. Now, these are for like meat and veg. These are kind of versatile knives. I'm not super well versed on what the different Japanese knives do, but there's a whole art and science behind that, which is super interesting. Now, this long one right here is a meat knife. This long, flat, kind of rounded at the edges one looks like a giant metal tongue depressor. That's going to be for slicing long cuts of meat, slicing through the char on meat. It's like a meat, what are those, meat slicers? It's like a meat slicer has that round continuous blade of the same angle, no serrations on it. It's the same thing. Not serrated, long cutting surface. Okay. So just keep that in mind. So those are the types of knives. There's many different more kinds, but this is just what we're starting with for now. Types of pots and pans. Okay. Now you want to go online, look up an infographic, whatever, right? There's all kinds of great resources online that you can do, and you can, learn very, very, very quickly quite a bit of information. If you don't know what you need to cook a dish, look it up. You can, this is an amazing time. We got the internet at our fingertips. So there's different kinds of skillet, frying pan, wok, grill pan, saucepan, saucier, double boiler, saute pan, multi-pot with these little strainies in it, brazier, not brazier, that's a different thing. Braising, I don't know if it's called a brazier, right? French oven, or there's also Dutch oven, there's stock pot, roasting pan, deep skillet. There's all different kinds of pans. Saute pan, you can see, is not as curved. It's kind of deep, right? They all do different things. Do you need one of each? Absolutely not. You definitely don't need one of each. I would recommend, if you don't have anything, at all, find a little set like this, right? You got a 9-inch pan, looks like a 9-inch pan. You got maybe a 12-inch pan. You got a small sauce pot, medium pot, and a larger saute pot. Oh, and then there's a big stock pot right there. That might even be overkill, depending on how big your family is. It might be just enough. But if you get a set, I tend to prefer like ceramic non-stick over Teflon is a no-go for me in my kitchen. It's a hard no. But you get a set, okay. Couple different sizes of things so you can get a feel for what you like. So allow yourself to have, a tool that you gravitate towards, and a tool that maybe you don't necessarily gravitate towards, or maybe you don't need it, or maybe you don't use it. You gotta start somewhere. Don't worry about getting the perfect thing. Okay. So I'm gonna go into Amazon for 1 second, because we had some really cool pots. I think it was Blue Diamond cookware, and I'm not paid by this company or anything. It's just what I've been experimenting with in my kitchen. I've used a number of different kinds of cookware, and Blue Diamond is really cool because it's not going to leach. I like it because they say it's not going to leach. It's tri-ply stainless steel, which means it's 3 different layers which hold a certain amount of heat, and they heat evenly. A thin pan doesn't heat evenly across the pan. A slightly thicker pan is going to heat a little bit more evenly, and it's going to transfer the heat throughout the pan a little bit more evenly. I tend to like thick bottom pans for that reason. Again, there's a lot of preference. You got to experiment, see what you like. Now, as long as you treat these nice and you don't use metal in it, you don't scrape them all up, they're pretty non-stick and they're pretty great. We got this one right here. I think it was $60 for 2, right? It came with a 10-inch and a 12-inch. I use them every day. I love them. Great investment. Great investment in your health, right? Not necessarily so much of a health investment that you might have thought of as a health investment, but it definitely is, because you can control what goes in your mouth. You can control your health to a greater extent, right? Not perfect and not all the way, but better. So PFAS free. This is a great thing. This is great. Blue Diamond cookware, diamond infused ceramic nonstick. Okay, how much of this is just marketing? How much of this is really useful? I don't necessarily know, but what I do know is that this particular set has a 7-inch frying pan, which is a little bit small. It's like, 2 or 3 eggs you could do in it, maybe. 9.5-inch frying pan, we're starting to get there. 2.5-quart saute pan is good. 20-quart saucepan with lid is going to be like small. 20-quart, sorry, 2-quart. 2-quart small. 3-quart saucepan with lid is a little bit bigger, right? 5-quart stock pot with lid is a little bit bigger yet. They're not huge, but it's a nice range of different things that you can try. See what you like, see what you need. Maybe you need bigger, maybe you need smaller. What I love about ordering in Amazon is you can just return it so easily. You get it home, you open it up, you're like, that is not nearly small enough. Get rid of it. You could even order two different sized things, 2 different sized sets. See which one comes in, which one fits better. Drop the old one off, pick the new one up. They even got a 20-piece one. Look at this. 20-piece. You want to go deluxo, you want to go really deluxo, get the 20-piece set. Who knows what's in that? We got 2 nylon utensils, mesh skimmer plate, muffin pan, loaf pan, cookie sheet, round pan, saucepans, 10-inch pan, 8-inch pan, frying pan, 10-inch frying pan, 8-inch frying pan, 5.5-inch frying pan, 11-inch saute pan with lid. That's like one of my go-tos. I use that for almost everything. 5-quart stock pot. I use a pot. Okay, if you had only these 2 things in your kitchen, a 11-inch saute pan and lid and a 5-inch stock pot with lid, you'd be fine. You'd probably be just fine. It's nice to have a little bit of variety so that you have the right size tool for the right size thing. But if you only had those two things, you'd be fine. Okay. So, but I would recommend getting at least 2 frying pans if you're more than one person, and at least 2 sizes of pot, a small pot and a medium or a large pot, or a medium and a large might be the way to go. But anyway, PFAS, triple star, write this in your notes, whatever it is. PFAS is an incredibly dangerous forever chemical that causes all kinds of messed up cancers and is tied to Teflon. If you want to not sleep very well at night, go online and look up PFAS, Teflon, and DuPont's scandals. They ran into all these, they paid a tremendous amount of money in class action lawsuits for trying to hide PFAS spills into water supplies, and the amazingly awful things that PFAS can do when it gets in contact with human body or animal bodies, tumors, kidney cancers, kidney diseases, all different kinds of things. DuPont Teflon lawsuit. There was a lawsuit, but there was also the podcast that we listened to about it. Was a really great story. American Scandal, DuPont chemical cover-up story. That was a really great story about, I guess a lot of this happened in West Virginia, Ohio. But if you wanted to go DuPont, there's a ton of DuPont, Teflon cover-up scandal. You go online, Google that. You see a lot of really, really terrible things that particular chemical has done. And that is present in the water supply in a lot of places. They found it actually in one of the Kaneohe wells. They found trace amounts of PFAS, presumably from the flame retardant materials that they use at the airport. So if you live near an airport or an Air Force base or a military base that uses PFAS as a flame retardant, or if you work in a kitchen, they might even have it, an industrial kitchen, they might have it, which I don't know why you'd be listening to this, but anyway, PFAS, very much a problem. So you want to avoid PFAS at all costs. You want to avoid Teflon. Maybe you want to avoid Teflon. I tend to avoid Teflon because if it doesn't have Teflon, if it has never had Teflon, it's more likely to be PFAS free. BPA is a plastic contaminant. PFAS is a Teflon contaminant. We want to avoid BPA and we want to avoid Teflon in our cookware. Okay, dishwasher safe, oven safe. That's good stuff. That's what we like. So anyway, doesn't have to be this exact pan. Doesn't have to be ceramic. Doesn't have to be diamond encrusted ceramic. And as far as those go, these aren't even that expensive. $25, $30 for a good pan may seem like a lot, but if it's a tool that you use every single day or every other day, if you have this for a year, how much does that cost you over a year? If you have this for 10 years, how much does that cost you over 10 years? Right? It becomes almost a minuscule amount of money. This is one of those purchases that is going to be well worth it. A good knife, good pan, a good pot, good cutting board, you can't beat it. Okay? So, that's that. We got our knives. We got our cooking terms. We're going towards our cooking terms. Hold on. This got to get back to it. Got to find my place. I got too many tabs open in my brain. See, my station is a mess. My station's a mess. I got to clean through it. We were here. Heat oil in a large pot over heat. Remember that? That was a while ago, wasn't it? Heat oil in a large pot over high heat. Okay. So our oil, remember, was the first thing that we pulled out. 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Heating, right? We're going to warm it up. Oil over a large pot, in a large pot. A large pot. So get your large pot out and put it over high heat. Now you're going to want to watch it because it's going to start to smoke. You're going to add your garlic and your onion and you're going to saute for 1 minute. Then you're going to add your capsicum, which is pepper. I don't know why they call it capsicum. Maybe this is an English website. I don't know. And then cook until the onion comes translucent, comes clear, right? So we have our instructions here. Now we haven't turned our oven on yet. Don't turn your oven on yet. We're just going through the recipe. We're understanding what we're going to do. Okay, we're going to cook till they get translucent good. Then we're going to add the beef, breaking it up as you go. You throw it in, you mash it up with a wooden spoon or a plastic spoon if you have that. Mash it, break it up as you go. Once the beef turns from red to brown, you're going to add the remaining ingredients, except the cheese, stir, bring to simmer, and then turn down to medium. Remaining ingredients is literally everything but the cheese. So where's the cheese in here? Shredded cheese, 2 cups, right? So you're gonna be adding your pepper. Well, we already did that. You're gonna add your beef, canned tomato, can of red kidney beans, beef broth, macaroni pasta, cilantro. Well, that's for a garnish. So we're not actually gonna add that. So if you see garnish means decoration. Garnish means decoration. You put it on the side. If you ever gone to a restaurant, they put leaves on the corner of the plate that you don't eat and flowers, and you're like, I don't understand. That's the garnish. Like, it's just there for decoration. So you don't even necessarily need to do that. Why does it say? See, I don't know why it says 1 cup coriander / cilantro. That doesn't make sense. So I think it's half a cup coriander. That doesn't make any sense. Maybe coriander is the cilantro leaf. Maybe they're the same plant. See, look at that. You learned something new. I don't even know. But if a dish were asking you for a 1/4 cup of coriander, that's going to be unedible. Unless you're cooking for 50 people, that's going to be inedible. That's way too much coriander. But I guess maybe coriander is cilantro seed. I don't know. So, okay, and then all the spices, you're going to add in all your spices, right? That's what it says here. Cover and cook for 12 minutes. We're keeping the moisture in, and if you remember, we're adding the pasta. And it's going to cook till al dente. What does that mean? Al dente means on the tooth, I think, something like that. It means toothy. So al dente means like it's not soft mush, but it's also not undercooked. It's not raw or crunchy. Like, it doesn't have a crunch, but it's not mush. Most people, if you haven't grown up in an Italian household or you haven't grown up around pasta being cooked regularly, you've probably had overcooked mush pasta. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with overcooked mush pasta. I like a well overcooked mac and cheese as much as the next guy. But al dente means there's still a little bit of tooth. You bite into it a little bit. It's not hard. It's not getting stuck in your teeth, but it's a little bit harder than mush. Okay. Meaning, and it says right here, meaning just cooked, still a tiny bit on the firm side, should be saucy, but not tons of liquid. Okay, and there's a video. That's great. There's a video, not necessarily this one of the guy in the jet ski in the boat, probably selling insurance or something, but the video of how to actually cook the thing. Okay, cook and cover 12 minutes. turn off the stove, but leave the pot on the stove. Stir through half of the cheese. It should still be a bit saucy. So meaning adding, taking it off the heat, adding the cheese, stirring it a bit through, give it a taste, adjust the salt and pepper. Then top the remaining cheese on the top, put the lid back on, and leave it until the cheese melts for about 2 minutes. The sauce will absorb further into the pasta. Sprinkle with coriander, or I guess they mean cilantro, if desired, and then serve immediately. Okay? So that's what you're going to do, right? And now you go through the process and you do each of these things. Okay? Well, let's talk fire. If you're going to cook and you've never cooked before, you don't know about fire in the kitchen, now you do. We're going to talk about oil. The first thing it does here, it says heat oil. Once you've heated oil, if you've heated oil, once it starts to smoke, you're not far away from it from catching fire, which is fine. You can cook with the dish smoking, right? Once the oil is smoking, it's preparing to catch on fire. If you throw food in and it starts to steam, the steam is not smoke, it's different. So the food that you add is going to bring down the temperature. So just because you see something smoking doesn't mean you're going to have a fire in your kitchen. Prolonged smoke and a lot of smoke means there's going to be a problem, and you need to turn off the heat or cover it. If there's an oil fire, if that oil catches fire in the pan and it goes up, whatever you do, never use water. Never pour water on it, because it'll explode. It'll explode in your face. It'll catch your kitchen on fire. You never pour water on a grease fire. You cover it, you pour salt on it, or you pour flour on it to smother it. Cover it with a lid. This is why it's great to have a lid. It's great for all your frying pans to have a lid, because you can cover them in the event of a fire. You cover it. If there's a fire, you cover it, you wait until it cools down 10 or 20 minutes before you touch it. Okay? Never, never, never pour water on a fire. If you have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen, that's great. You should. It's not necessarily your first go-to in the case of a kitchen fire, or maybe you add like wine to something that's sauteing and then it goes up a little bit. Don't freak out about that. It should go down right away. But if you are freaked out about it, cover it. Cover it and wait. Okay? When in doubt, cover it and wait. Okay, no grease fires, everybody, okay? Okay, so then you just walk your way through the dish. Stick to the recipes at first, especially when you're learning how to cook, because the recipe is going to be your guide. And from cooking several recipes, from cooking a number of recipes, watching videos, learning how to cook, you're going to gain skills, and you're going to be able to go off script, and you're going to be able to freestyle. And you're going to know what things you can exchange and what things you can't exchange. So let's have dessert now. Let's have some cookies. Let's do chocolate chip cookies. Yeah. Who doesn't love chocolate chip cookies? This is the best chocolate chip cookie recipe ever. I found it. Can you believe it? In one search, I found it. It was so quick. I've been eating bum cookies my whole life, but these are the good ones. So you see, look at all the nonsense. If you don't see, if you're just listening, sorry, but look at all the nonsense that pops up. Sign up for the email, find a wine store retailer, buy T-Mobile. There's all this nonsense that's not cookie recipe. And Pinterest has ruined cookie recipes for everybody forever. So keep scrolling down, blah, 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 nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. Scroll down until you find the ingredients, which is embedded in a bevy of ads. Ingredients first, da-da-da. Instructions at the bottom. And this one is cool because it has a multiplier. Ooh, I want to cook, let's see. Usually a recipe will say, okay, the title, who made it, a little something about it. And then it will tell you how many servings there are. And this one actually has a little toggle where you can increase the recipe just by moving this bar, which is cool, but not all of them have that. It'll tell you servings, how long it should take to prepare, and how long it should take to cook, roughly. Going to depend on the kitchen, going to depend on your competency as a cook or a baker, but no worries, you're only going to get more better and more efficient as you go. So don't worry about it. Cook time, 8 minutes, look at that. But that means this dish, let's see, prep time, 10 minutes, cook time, 8 minutes, total time, 30 minutes, okay? It's going to tell you what you need. Measuring spoons. That's definitely a kitchen must. Measuring cups, measuring spoons. Let's put that on the list. Supplies. Measuring cups. Measuring spoons. Definitely recommended. Don't eyeball that stuff, especially when baking. And especially if you don't know what those things are and you can't eyeball them, you're new, that's fine. Small and medium pot or medium large pot or medium and large pot. Okay. You can always use a larger pot for smaller things for the most part, but it's usually hard to use a small pot for larger things. So that's why I tend to be a little bit on the larger side. Cutting knives. Let's see, 9, 10, 12 inch chef knife. And others if you like. There's one called a mezzaluna, which means half moon, which is a gigantic Parmesan cheese wheel cutting knife. I'll pull it up for the people who can see. This is gigantic. I'm sure you can cut other things like salads and pizza and pesto and all kinds of stuff. We used it to cut this giant wheel. It was a big, funny, curvy knife. But anyway, there's a half moon knife. And we're putting that on the list. Pans. Let's say 10-inch saute pan, 12-inch saute with lid. Right, these are just basics. There's all, so towels for like tidying the kitchen, washing the surfaces and stuff. It's good to have paper towels. I like to use reusable, but I really like to use natural fiber whenever possible. You don't have to get silk hand towels for the kitchen. That'd be ridiculous. But if you wipe a hot surface with a like a polyester towel, or you grab a hot plate from the oven with a like a polyester or a plastic based fiber towel, it will melt in your hand and it will stick to the oven surface that you're wiping. Natural fiber towels are going to be less likely to do that. They still burn, definitely still burn, but they're going to be less likely to melt to things and to cause messes that way. And when they melt to stuff, then they eventually burn, and that makes a really nasty chemical smell, and it can ruin the food if it's in the oven, the chemical smell with the food, and we just want to avoid that. Whereas a natural fiber, you catch it on fire while you're dealing in the oven or something, it's just a little bit of smoke. Should be less problematic than a non-natural fiber. So I tend towards to natural fiber kitchen towels. Right? Don't go over the top. Don't worry about it too much. Measuring cups, measuring spoons, measuring cup sets. They usually sell them in sets. Okay. Those are your basics. Cutting board, I recommend you go on the bigger side with your cutting board than the smaller side, just because nobody wants to work on a tiny little space and, whatever. Oh, and a mixing bowl. Mixing bowl. I like a 12-inch big stainless. Those are just easy to use. Okay. So we've talked about our cuts briefly. We're about to make dessert. We're going to make our cookies. Let's just go back and put a pin on the cuts. We'll just finish the cuts. There's a picture here, right? There's the julienne, which is a long slice, long thin ribbons almost. There's the slices, which is what it sounds like. Brunoise, dice, mince, those are different size shapes. Chopping and mincing don't need to be so uniformly shaped. Cubes are what it sounds like, little cubes, like almost like the size of a dice. So don't get, which is confusing with dice, because dice isn't the size of a dice that we're familiar with. Cube is usually the size of a dice, but they're both square. And chiffonade, which is rolling it like a joint, I mean, rolling it like you would roll something, and slicing it into ribbons, slicing it into ribbons, right? So imagine you're rolling a few slices of paper together or a few leaves together, and you're slicing it along like a sausage, like you're slicing along the sausage, and it's unrolling into these little ribbons. Okay, those are just like super basic, um, some basic cuts that you're gonna see. There's more advanced cuts and more fancy things, but don't worry about the fancy. Keep it simple to start. And down here, I just noticed that there's a picture of, it says how to sharpen your knives. That's a good thing to know. That's a good thing to know, how to keep your knives sharp. Get one of these honing things, but that's a conversation for another time. You can see she's rolling up her basil here. She rolls her basil from tail to tip and slices it. Okay, so we'll put a pin in that now. Move on to the next thing. Got this, got that. Tofu, carrots, and broccoli with tuna. Nobody's ever going to eat that because that's weird. And we have our salted butter as our ingredients for the best chocolate chip cookies in the entire world. Can you believe it? We found them. 1 cup of butter. Go to the cabinet or go to the refrigerator. Get your butter out, and it says softened here, which means leave it out on the counter for 20 minutes. Presuming it's a room temperature and it's not, you're not in a cold environment. If you're in a cold environment, maybe move it near a cooking surface so it warms up, not on it so it melts, just so it gets soft. There's an important chemical difference in cooking and baking between softened butter and melted butter. And this is a case where we want softened and not melted. Melted butter breaks an emulsion that happens. It breaks the whey and the ghee, right? It breaks the protein away from the ghee. I don't necessarily know the food chemistry about it. You have to check in with Alton Brown about that. But softened is different. It's different. So then you get 1 cup of white sugar or whatever sweetener it is that you're going to use. You get 1 cup of light brown sugar. So sugar. While we're talking sugar and substitutions, we do a lot of non-sugar cooking. We do a lot of alternative sugars like monk fruit or erythritol or stevia. And those have their own, like any other food, they have their own cost benefit, right? Sugar has a cost benefit. It's super tasty. A lot of recipes are very, a lot of recipes use sugar and not erythritol for obvious reasons. And the proportions of those can be different. So if you're going to use, let's say, monk fruit sweetener, for example, you have your monk fruit extract or you have monk fruit 1-to-1. It'll usually say on the package, this is designed to be used 1-to-1 monk fruit to regular sugar. You're going to want to look at those recipes that say specifically. So let's look up chocolate chip cookies with monk fruit, and then they're going to come up. There's your monk fruit chocolate chip cookie recipe. There's keto chocolate chip cookie with coconut flour, almond flour, or coconut oil. There's gluten-free. There's all different kinds of variations. At first, I would recommend, rather than trying to just substitute on your own without really knowing how these things are going to react chemically with each other, look for a recipe that specifically deals with that specifically is designed to work with that particular chemical group, right? Presumably you'll find somebody online who's been gluten-free or has been sugar-free for like 10 or 20 years, and they have this blog that they've been posting all these wonderful foods and recipes that they've been doing, which is great. They've done a lot of the legwork so that we don't have to. They've done a legwork that I haven't done. So we're going to defer to them in these cases. We might have to weed through a sea of advertisements, as you see here, but we're going to find what we're looking for. Okay. Light brown sugar packed. So usually with brown sugar and white sugar, brown sugar is going to be dense. It still has the molasses in it. It's like sticky and clumpy. It's like what salt does here in Hawaii. It just kind of clumps. And you're going to pack that down. Brown sugar is always packed. Granulated white sugar is never really packed. And for baking, usually you're going to want to put it in your measuring cup and then scrape with the back of a flat surface like the back of a knife, but it has to be flat. You'll level it off. Scrape across the top and level it off. Two teaspoons pure vanilla extract. Don't forget to use teaspoons and not tablespoons. And I recommend pure vanilla extract rather than synthetic vanilla flavoring. What's the difference, you ask? I'm glad you asked. Vanilla extract. Let's see. There's pure vanilla extract. And what's the other one? Vanilla flavoring. So there's a lot of vanilla flavorings. Yeah, here it is. Castoreum. Beaver butts emit goo used for vanilla flavoring. There it is. There it is, folks. The unfortunate news is that a lot of vanilla flavorings involve beaver butt. Sorry, there's a gland around the butt that some vanilla flavoring comes from. Artificial vanilla. So this one is saying that that's not true, that artificial vanilla is made from synthetic vanillin, according to McGoran. Beaver castoreum has been used to make a lot of different smells and things like that. I don't think it's entirely a myth. I think you're going to see people saying that it's not the case, probably because they have an interest in how much vanilla gets sold. But what we want is vanilla, pure vanilla that's made from an extract in alcohol. Okay, so basically, how do you know? How do you know what's what? You go and you look at the ingredients. Let's see what McCormick's ingredients are, right? Vanilla, there's pictures of vanilla, alcohol, bean, extractives in water, and alcohol. So that should be fine. That should be fine. I don't know, maybe you can get just beaver butt flavor if you wanted it. If you were worried that they took the beaver butt out and you thought that that was the best flavor of vanilla for the best chocolate chip cookies in the world, then do it that way. 2 large eggs. Eggs come in all different sizes. If it's large or extra large, is there a massive difference? It probably between brands, there's even a difference between large, medium, and extra large eggs. Like I don't know what the level, the grading of consistency is there. So if it says 2 large eggs and you have extra large eggs, you're probably fine. If you have 2 medium eggs and it asks for 2 extra large eggs, there might need to be some moderation that's done. It might need to be 2.5 medium eggs. I don't know. One way that you can tell the difference is one way that you could negotiate and navigate that kind of confusion would be with take 2 extra large eggs and crack them in a measuring cup and see what it measures out as, and take 2 medium eggs, crack them in a measuring cup, see what that measures out as. Now, if they don't sit high enough where they're level across the top, then you might want to scramble it down so they sit level, so you can see what they measure out as. 3 cups of flour. Again, you're going to level it across the top, right? They're not heaping cups. It's very important that you don't do heaping cups when baking. I learned this in home ec class in high school, but it's true. And then baking soda and baking powder are not the same things. Repeat after me. Baking soda and baking powder are not the same things. Say it to yourself. Remember it like a mantra. So if something calls for baking soda, you cannot substitute with baking powder unless you do some other substitutions to make those leavening agents or things that make food fluffy and light. Unless you find a way to navigate that with alternatives like baking, like some people will use vinegar, some people use other tartar, cream of tartar, which I forget what the chemical component of that is, but they'll use those things as leavening agents instead of baking soda and baking powder, which is the classic duo, the classic cooking duo. So remember, they're different things and they're different proportions for a reason. Okay, so don't confuse the proportions. They're not interchangeable. Teaspoon of sea salt, 2 cups of chocolate chips, chunks or chopped chocolate. Now, chopping chocolate is interesting because if you get chocolate bars, it's tricky to get. You'll oftentimes get a lot of shavings and a few big chunks. If you buy chocolate chunks, they tend to be more chunky, and you get less of this in between chocolate dust shaving and big chunks. So I prefer chocolate chunk in my cookies. Chocolate chips are great. I'm not going to turn them away, but I prefer usually prefer chunks for baking. Chopped chocolate is great too, but just know that you might want to be a little bit more attentive with the size that you make each of the pieces because you want to have consistency across the size of the chocolate. I would assume so, right? Because you want this roughly the same amount of chocolate in each cookie. You don't want to get one cookie that's just all cookie when you're hoping for chocolate, and one chocolate that's all chocolate when you're hoping for a nice balance of chocolate and cookie, right? These are the things you don't think about. This is the nuance, right? Maybe you do think about them when you're eating the cookie. You're like, there's a lot of chocolate chips in that one. Um, then you follow your instructions. So you get all these things out. Get them out, you measure them out, you keep them separate in their separate dishes and bowls. Now, eventually, I'm going to show you a shortcut. I'm going to show you a shortcut because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different dishes that you have to wash later. It's 10 different dishes that you have to wash later, which is a pain in the butt. So I'm going to show you how to shortcut. I'll show you how to shortcut that. What you do is you go through the instructions and you look for this term right here, in a separate bowl. In a separate bowl, right? So let's read through the instructions together. Preheat oven to 375 degrees, F Fahrenheit. Line a baking pan with parchment paper and set it aside. Parchment paper and wax paper, not the same thing. Not the same thing. You could probably also cook this in a sheet pan. Sheet pan is a large flat pan that sits in the oven. You've probably all seen these. And if not, then Google it, look it up, see what it looks like. You can grease the pan so it doesn't stick, or put it on parchment paper, which is not wax paper. Different paper. Okay. In a separate bowl, mix flour, baking soda, salt, baking powder, and set aside. So they're already telling you to do that. Put it all in one bowl and put it off to the side. Cream together butter, eggs, and sugars until combined. Beat in the eggs and vanilla until fluffy. Mix the dry ingredients until combined. Right now we're putting in our dry ingredients, and now here is obviously butter, sugar, and eggs and vanilla. Those are going to be our wet ingredients. A lot of times in baking you'll see them say start with the dry, then add the wet, or start with the wet and then add the dry. Okay, so that is another way that we can kind of shortcut the amount of dishes that we leave for ourselves, but it's also very technical for baking. I'm not a professional baker, never baked in a restaurant, but I've baked in my life and I have some exposure to around it. I've worked alongside the bakers, so I've seen, a lot of what they do. And this is also basics. So then you're going to add your chocolate chips and mix well. You're going to roll 2 to 3 tablespoon size cookies, right? What is 3 tablespoons? What I would recommend doing is take your cookie dough and pack tablespoon measure, and then roll it together into a ball. And you can either weigh that ball, and it'll be like, I don't know, let's say 5 grams, or let's say it's a 5-gram ball. Then you can have that, and I don't know, I'm just picking a number, and you can roll to the size, or you can roll to the weight on a scale. Right, scale, you cover it with saran wrap, just the part that moves freely up and down. You don't want to cover the whole thing so that the scale can't move freely, can't get an accurate measure. But you're going to weigh or eyeball the size of these things, and you want them to be all roughly the same size so they cook at roughly the same speed. Makes sense, right? Bake in preheated oven, right? Remember we preheated to 375. That's great. That's always up there. 8 to 10 minutes. Take them out when they are just barely starting to turn brown. Let them sit in a baking pan for 2 minutes before removing to a cooling rack. Okay, cooling rack. What is a cooling rack? A cooling rack is what it sounds like. It's kind of a rack that sits above the countertop. It's got, kind of grates in it, and it lets air circulate below the cookies or whatever it is that you're baking or cooking so that it can cool on all sides. If you leave it in the baking sheet, it will cool more slowly. The bottom will continue to cook a little bit more. It might get a little bit more crispy on the bottom. But if you pull them off and you put them on a cooling rack, they're going to cool more evenly. Now you can still cool them. You can still cool them, no problem, on a pan. They're just different techniques, right? And it's fine to go either way. And you might wind up taking them out of the oven half a minute sooner so that they cook that extra half minute on the, from the bottom, right? But you might want to find over time. Always stick to the recipe first. If you can't put them on a cooling rack, you let them sit for 2 minutes. You could put them on different plates, which are cool, so the plate kind of cools them off a little bit, or you can take it and let it sit by a window so it cools off. Okay. So now going back, did we get rid of our recipe there? Yeah. So we got rid of our mac and cheese and chili mac and cheese recipe. But if you remember seeing, there were two sets of ingredients. So I'm going to go back to the, let's go. Okay. So you have your chili mac and cheese recipe. So it was oil, onion, and what else was in there? Oil, onion, in there first, right? And you saute the onion and you let it get translucent, and that stuff can all go in one pan together. Can go in one bowl as you're measuring it out and adding it and combining all the things that are added at the same time to the dish. You can combine them. So we would have then one bowl there of those ingredients, and then we'd have everything else that was like the seasoning, the this, the that, the tomatoes, the beans, the tomato paste, all that stuff. You could all theoretically measure that all out into one bowl if you wanted to, but if you measure too much, you can't go back. That's why it's really great to measure things into just one bowl and just have them all stationed, ready to go, or on a plate where you can kind of keep them segregated, or in a bowl, they kind of all fall to the center. But if if it's simple enough and you trust that you can handle it, you can put it all in one bowl and then you just add it later. It saves you from having 25 little bowls that you have to wash later. But if you have a washing machine, maybe it's, or a dishwasher, maybe it's not such a big deal. So this is suggesting that the whipping happens from a creaming together. So that's another term, right? Creaming is a baking term, beating is a baking term, mixing is a baking term. Those mean different things. So what is creaming? What is creaming in baking? Creaming incorporates air into the fat or on the butter. Creaming butter and sugar form a leavening, which helps to add volume to a batter in the final baked good. So how do I cream in baking? Let's keep this PG-13, folks. How to cream butter. Creaming evenly disperses the sugar. So it's butter and sugar, mixing the butter and sugar together. So you're kind of mixing it and aerating it a little bit. So this is baking school, how to cream butter, right? I'll show you how to do it. And she's got one of these hand blenders, right? She's got one of these hand blenders. Blah blah blah. There's the sugar. There's the butter. She's beating them together with a hand blender. So if you're doing this by hand, it's going to be arduous. Definitely recommend getting one of these hand blenders, or what they're recommending using here is a KitchenAid stand mixer, which is a really great tool to have in the kitchen. You don't need it. Nobody needs it. You don't need anything. You can always, I think less is more, and especially when it comes to home appliances. Being a guy who's moved a lot of times in his life, I prefer to have as few home appliances as I can. But this particular mixer is a pretty excellent thing. It has a lot of funky attachments that you can do all kinds of fun things with. Here's a hook for kneading bread, a paddle for creaming butter, a whisk for whisking your meringues and stuff together. So Beating the eggs and vanilla until fluffy, that's going to be more of a whisk-based activity. Beating, vigorous mixing, vigorous until you're mixing and making it light and fluffy. I don't know if you've ever seen how meringue is made, but it's made with just whisking and whisking and whisking. Beating, I think, is the same level of vigor that you would have with, um, no, it would be whipping. That's why they call it whipped cream, because it's cream that's whipped, which is a different level. Those are all different gradations of intensity. So if you don't know what the terms mean, look them up. This isn't necessarily a terminology class. This is about how to get started. Mixing in the dry ingredients until combined. Folding in is another way, which is what it sounds like. You fold the mixture on top of it, fold the mixture onto itself, fold the mixture onto itself, not just and randomly stirring in the dish. It's very specific set of movements. Okay, so baking is a little bit more nuanced. Well, I mean, they're both nuanced. I think it'd be unfair to say that baking is nuanced and cooking isn't. They require different levels of accuracy and measurement. So anyway, we have the best chocolate chip cookies in the world are made. Yum, yum, yum. You eat them up and then you are full. And then hopefully you have some leftovers of dessert and hopefully you have some leftovers of dinner. And maybe you take some leftovers of dinner tomorrow for lunch, or maybe we go on to cooking something for lunch. Now, I'm going to talk about eggs for a minute because eggs are very, very tricky. Eggs are very tricky. So there's a chef. His name is Jacques Pepin. He's French. Jaqus Pepin. Pepin. Now he does some great. He see this is the first one of the first videos that comes up is I met the omelet god Jacques Pepin. He's a guy who knows how to make a mean omelet. French style omelet, country style omelet. They're very different styles of omelet. He knows how to make a good omelet. Another guy, very entertaining, also knows how to make a good omelet. Is what's his name? Gordon Ramsay. If you prefer to have, if you prefer to learn your cooking without his brand of profanity, then I would not recommend that. Gordon Ramsay eggs. He's more curse like a sailor kind of vibe, which can be fun for some people, but there's all different kinds of ways to cook eggs. Now, how many ways to cook eggs are there? Let's see. Ways to cook eggs. Look at that. Steamed, over easy, scrambled, omelet, baked, sunny side up, soft boiled, cloud, poached, hard boiled, soft boiled, 7-minute. There's all different varieties and different kinds of eggs. So I would recommend going in and learning and looking at all the different ways to make eggs. And watch Jacques Pepin's videos on eggs. You go into YouTube and look up Jacques Pepin eggs. He does a wicked poached egg. He does hard-boiled eggs. He does scrambled eggs, which he actually mixes with like sour cream. He makes them super, super creamy, super soft looking. They're the exact opposite of what you would get in like a continental breakfast or like cafeteria garbage food. They're very, very intentional. Here's again omelet, baked eggs, poached eggs, scrambled, hard boiled, fried, over easy, sunny side, over medium. There's all different kinds of ways to learn eggs. I recommend watching some videos on that and gaining some insight on that. Whatever your favorite dish is, first dish that comes to mind when I say what's your favorite dish, go online, look up how to make it. Look up a YouTube video on how to make it. Right? If you click on one, you're like, this is stupid, I don't watch it. Well, go to a different one. If you want to see a recipe and you're like, I don't like this recipe, or I hate the way this website's laid out and there's too much nonsense and there's all these ads and I can't find it, go try a different one. And you go around the obstacle, find the answer that you need and get in there and just start cooking. It's not going to be perfect. It's never going to come out perfect. It's probably never going to come out as good as you wanted it to come out. And that's okay. That's okay. Sometimes you can be like, Dish comes out and you're like, wow, that is just fantastic. That's better than, and you're going to be so happy when this happens. I promise it'll happen if you stay patient and persistent. You're going to make a dish, and it might even be scrambled eggs or a hard boiled egg, and you make it, or soft boiled it, whatever. And you make the dish and you taste it and you're like, that was better than anything I've bought in a restaurant before. And that is going to be a happy day. And then you're going to realize, why would I ever go to the store and pay money for this when I could just make it better for half the price at home? Which, some people like that. Some people like to live that way. Some people like to, eat at 5-star restaurants, and that's their thing. But anyway, don't worry about the process. Worry about the process. Don't worry about the first initial results. If you're disappointed at how your first came out, your first dish comes out, just say, okay, I learned. Okay, let's try again. Okay, get back on that horse. It'll probably take less time than you think to get something really delightful to come out. Follow the recipes when in doubt. Follow the recipe. And here's, maybe I'll add to this a little bit, but that should be the basics of all you need to know how to cook. And then the dishes, that's the hard part. That's the easy. Is that the easy part? Is that the hard part? Okay, so dishes, ways to expedite the dishes. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing here. Ways to expedite the dishes. If you have one of those 2 sinks, you can have a soak sink, and then you rinse, and then you soak sink, and then you soap it up and let it sit in the other one. Or you can, what I like to do is have a dirty sink. I soap everything up. I leave it on either the other side of the sink or in a separate sink if it's a two basin sink. Or soap it, leave it on the counter, soap it, leave it on the counter, soap it, leave it on the counter. Try not to make a soupy mess on the counter. Or if you have that pan that you were going to use, that you had your cookies on, you can leave that there so it catches some of the water. You soap it up, leave it, soap it up, leave it, soap everything to get it out of the way, to empty to the sink, and then rinse. Then rinse the dish into the drying rack, rinse the dish into the drying rack, rinse the dish into the drying rack. And I like to batch it. I like to go in batches like that. I used to be a dishwasher. So when you have, 200, 300, 1,000 dishes that you need to wash and it's midnight and you want to get home before 2 in the morning, you get quick, right? So batching is a good way to go. Batching is a good way to go. Stack everything, bring it to the sink, soap everything, or as much as you can. Rinse everything, stack everything in the drying rack. That's one way to do it. If you have a dishwasher, dishwashing machine, you might have to do the pre-soak. You might have to do, scrub some of the hard stuff off. You might have to do a pre-rinse. I've always thought, like, if I have a washing machine and I have to pre-rinse, wash it, and then take it out and then wash it again, then there's no reason to have it at that point. So I just, in situations like that, I just wash it by hand because it's quicker, because you do it once and it's done. So, yeah, you're going to learn a lot of tips and tricks along the way. So don't get discouraged, have fun. Try to cook stuff that excites you. And if it's a boring dish and you don't like cooking it, move on to something else. And if you love it, then that's great. I hope you found this interesting and useful and helpful. If you have any other questions, send them along. Get them to me somehow. Maybe we'll make a follow-up to this. We'll make a part 2 or a second class that goes a little bit into more what we haven't covered here, because there's so much you can talk about. There's a lifetime of information here, depending on how deep you want to go. I'm trying to give you just the cursory go from I don't know how to cook to now I know how to cook. So I hope hope that gives you the basics. Hope that gives you enough to get started with. And I wish you the best of luck. Hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time and attention. And share this with somebody who you think could benefit from learning from it, if you feel so inclined, if it was helpful to you. And see you soon. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.